Welcome to the next episode of KapVista Klips. Here with me, I have Jason Hood from the BourkeHood group. He's joining us for this episode. We're going to find out a bit about him and what his global ambitions are. A bit of a backstory. Jason and I met 4.5 years ago in London. He came across as just a pure hustler, like a proper entrepreneur, and it really stuck with me. And for the last sort of 4 years, we've become mates, and now we work alongside each other, and we've got a really good working relationship. So I want to bring him on board because I see this guy, every day, and he's kicking goals, from 5 a.m. to 1 a.m. on some days. Like it seems like he just doesn't sleep. So Jason, welcome. Thanks for being on board, and we'd love to sort of find out a bit about you and what you're doing.
Perfect. Thanks for the introduction, Daniel. Some of that's true, some of it's not true, but that's fine. Appreciate the introduction and good to be a part of it. So look forward to it.
Yeah, awesome. So, tell us what the BourkeHood group is, what you do, what's your focus, and tell me the story behind it.
Yeah, for sure. So originally I'm from Newcastle, Australia. Moved down to Sydney. Won't bore you guys too much about the whole story, but moved over to London and fell into the largest R&D innovation specialists in Europe. So they had about 21 countries worldwide, about 2,000 employees. Very quickly ended up being one of their top salespeople when I was there, bringing in just over $1 million Australian worth of business, probably a bit more than that in the first 9 months I was there. And I thought, you know what, after 3 to 6 months later, I went out my own in London. We ended up with 2 other business partners, ended up creating a company called SME Gov Capital. We had different visions, my business partners and myself, therefore we took our separate ways. In that same year, I came back to Australia and my mum had passed away. I had a good friend of mine and my grandma had passed only 12 months earlier. So went back to Australia to sort of start fresh, back to Newcastle, living on my dad and with my sister and my brother who were there at the time, and started BourkeHood, which is my late mother's maiden name, my last name. Started the BourkeHood group and thought, you know what, I've got to go again. So I think that started in just before COVID, that all hit, and then BourkeHood started. So we've now got an office in Australia, New Zealand, the US and UK. We have over 200 clients who signed last year alone in the R&D space, and we're looking to grow rapidly quite fast, as well as bring an R&D lending facility to help them clients as well.
Yeah. What I like about your model is the fact that you are not offering R&D as an add-on. It is your main focus, and what you do and why you're different to everybody else is that you actually employ technical consultants. So, understanding each company individually, their own R&D needs, and your consultants will go through line by line and articulate what is R&D and what isn't, and which is completely different to everybody else in the market. What made you, how did you come up with that? What was the driver behind that?
Yeah, so I mean, again, didn't sort of reinvent the wheel as such. We had the company I worked for in London would have specific software developers, engineers, scientists, whatever that may be for the specific sector, I should say, and then the financial consultants will speak the finance, because often at times what you find is companies that claim the R&D incentive, or they think they're doing a good job, but in a nutshell, they're not, and they're leaving a lot of money on the table. And then now with the big 4 and other companies, there's so much red tape around the auditing and also the R&D as an add-on that I think there's such a niche, or importance, I should say, around qualifying the R&D from a specialist, because one, it's your bread and butter. You're not clouded by other areas or red tape, so to speak, from other parts of the business or the other business you are getting. You're just doing the R&D to the best of your ability with the expertise you got, who are purely specializing in that area. So that's the angle we're going at now. There's no accounting, there's no auditing, there's nothing else. It's pure R&D innovation consulting for R&D lending, grants, as well as incentives. And that's what the model is for the global operations.
And Jace, because you bring the dual perspective from both London as well as Australia. How would you say the space that you're in, how is it different compared to UK to Australia?
Yeah, and to be honest with you, I can't speak for post UK after COVID or Brexit scenarios. I can only speak for pre that, so I'm not quite exactly sure comparing apples to apples in the current times. But UK, obviously, London especially, and again, this is prior to the effects of Brexit and COVID, was sort of the fintech capital of the world, and there was a lot more money floating around. I think purely because of the time zones and the amount of cash that was there was some fintech companies going for multiples of 16 and 20 times. You obviously got your Revoluts, your Monzos. Predominantly my targeted area were London-based companies around that software and other sectors, whereas a lot of the other technical consultants as well as the business developers would focus on your dentists, your vets, farming, agriculture, and other sectors. In UK, it's a lot easier to claim, or was previously a lot easier to claim. I know HMRC has cracked down a little bit, whereas in Australia, it's more of a hypothesis scientific report. Whereas in the UK, as an example, it's more diving down in them technical uncertainty and challenges based upon what it is. So UK is probably easier to claim rather than Australia. But again, with the expertise we've got, it makes it a lot easier in both countries.
Okay, yeah. And could you give us an example of one of the R&D projects that you came across that you worked on to claim?
Gosh, you put me on the spot here a little bit. Yeah, again, we've claimed lots from architecture, engineering, vets, dentists, farming. One that comes to mind was a microwavable fish finger. I spent 7 years trying to make a microwavable fish finger. It's like fish fingers for a single dad when he's 40 with his children. But they spent so much time trying to make this microwavable fish finger. They just couldn't get it. So they've spent 7 years and so much time doing that. Again,
so a failed project could apply as well.
So failed projects is the bread and butter. That's unreal. A lot of people think if it doesn't work or they can't commercialize, they can't claim. But because they had a failed project, they put so much money and so many resources in, that was actually a big R&D project to claim upon, all but they probably would have rathered it to be a working microwavable fish finger. So
you're talking about different industries. So what's the common misconceptions about R&D? Why is everybody eligible for R&D? Who is, who isn't? Because I know I speak to a lot of companies who would have no idea that they're eligible for R&D because they think I'm just building a dating app or a tech platform.
Yeah, for sure. So most of the time, it's people think you have to be curing cancer or the next Silicon Valley lab rat, or they have claimed R&D and their accountant's doing a good job. Again, a lot of the times they could be doing a great job if they are claiming, don't get me wrong, but I always say have a proof check by a specialist or somebody else, because even though if you are claiming, if you're not optimizing that claim to the best of your ability while staying compliant, it's indirectly you're leaving a lot of money on the table, non-dilutive funding as well. So going back to that point you made, there's pretty much R&D in, I'm not going to say 99% of areas, but a lot of areas across the board. So scaffolding, construction, software development, engineering, farming, just to name a couple. And there's three main criteria as a rule of thumb. It's if you're bearing the financial risk, therefore essentially while creating this product, is the cost falling out of your end? The second one's probably the main one, and after the financial risk is your technical staff, so any competent professional, are they expanding their knowledge while undergoing the project? So in other words, for the competent professional, can't they just type into Google or be in the open source? And it doesn't have to be state of the art or world first, because Google's done everything, or Apple or Google's done everything. It just has to be an outcome that's not out there in the open domain, and you've had to go back and reverse engineer this your whole self. So you're highlighting the journey per se, rather than the outcome. And that's what the relevant governing bodies, such as HMRC, such as IRS in the US, ATO/Oz Industry in Australia, and Inland Revenues, as well as Callaghan in New Zealand, they just want to see that journey and that steps, which then leads on to the systematic approach. So them three criteria makes up the R&D, and it's across a lot of sectors. And the second one is a lot of people think that an R&D tax credit, whereas if you're in a loss for Australia, New Zealand, and the UK as an example, you're getting back cash, whereas other people think you can't claim if you're in a loss.
So then bringing that to it, so why are you different from other, R&D incentive firms? Why, you said, if your accountant's doing a good job, so why are you different?
Again, it probably just comes down to the speciality of the R&D. We've got over 30 years experience just in Australia and New Zealand alone in the R&D, plus a lot more in the US and UK. Sarav Malhotra in Australia and New Zealand, as an example, he spent over 12 years heading up, been in the R&D teams for Australia and New Zealand previously with the Big Four. And again, it just gives us a greater insight because that's our bread and butter. That's all we do. Whereas accountants and other specialists, one, will probably throw the burden back onto the client to fill it out. But as I like to say, a lot of these clients don't know what's R&D and what's run of the mill. They've been in the game for so many years. They've been to university. They don't know what is in line with the legislation from that respective governing body. On the flip side, you have an accountant that may know that 20% is R&D, 20% isn't R&D, but it's that 60% in the middle that they don't have that technical expertise to distinguish what is R&D and what's not compared to their software, engineering, or science companies. So because that's our bread and butter, that's all we do. One, we take away that legwork, optimize your claim, and build that robust report for you to essentially comply.
Cool. That gives us a really good oversight, and it's really interesting for the people that are in our ecosystem to understand that they should be at least getting a second opinion on it.
I think as well, and it just took me then because you said ecosystem. In regards to the R&D incentive, it's in Australia and a few other countries, it's looked at very, very in a good way, I should say, from people trying to raise cash. A lot of people, especially in the US, it's massive emphasis on raise, try and build that big valuation. And it sometimes gets neglected. And the reason why I say this for, it's either they don't know about it or it gets neglected. And yes, maybe because they're not getting the hard cash back when they're in a loss. But in saying that, it's such a great exercise to get done prior to a raise, because one, if you can delay the raise and get non-dilutive funding from the R&D incentive that you're entitled to, it'll enhance your valuation depending on how that money's been spent. Whether that's further product development or commercialization through marketing and other avenues, naturally, if you enhance the product more or you get more revenues through the door, your valuation goes up. Yeah. It'll also quantify the R&D component for an investor as well. So when an investor comes in and looks at the books, if the CEO has claimed the R&D, that the investor will go, oh, okay, they've claimed this amount of R&D, they've got back this amount. Therefore, essentially, if I'm investing my funds, let's just say $1 million for argument's sakes, into software development, I'm going to get back $435,000. If you can illustrate this to an investor, that's naturally going to inflate your valuation or make you look so much more appealing to that investor. And therefore, it then enhances your product, may delay the next raise, or may get them on board a lot earlier.
Yeah, that's very interesting, and it's very relevant for the space that we play in. A lot of investors who may be watching this should be insisting that their portfolio companies are doing their R&D incentives if they're not already doing it.
So on that note as well, we've also got an R&D lending facility. So a lot of the times, essentially, you can only claim after the financial year has been finished, e.g. Australia, June to June, UK's all over the place, depending on what company chooses, and then New Zealand's March to March. From there is if you're 3 months, 6 months, or 9 months through the financial year, normally you can't claim until after that 12 months. Whereas we're partnered up with an R&D financing team, which allows you to actually claim 3 months, 6 months, or 9 months into your financial year through that R&D lending facility. So that's also another big option we've done with a few of our clients, because debt's a lot cheaper than equity, right? So if you're able to then claim the R&D incentive advance through this loan, R&D advance loan, you're almost putting on more developers or putting on more commercialization, which therefore either delays the raise that you're going to do or will essentially enhance your product that much that you're going to be raising at a higher valuation. So that's another good tool that people may be able to utilize as well.
Perfect.
All right. I think on the founder side, I wanted to ask you, Jay, so as a founder, what would you say, what's your driver? What gets you out of bed in the morning?
God, to be the best, as well as I'm lucky enough to help as many clients and pet companies as I can. I pride myself on everything you do. You've got to do the full of your ability. And as Dan mentioned earlier, sometimes it's extreme in other ways as well. So whether that's having a beer, enjoying yourself, having a bit of downtime, you got to keep yourself fresh while you're at work as well. So complementing both. In regards to why I get up in the morning, again, I love it. Love helping people. Love doing what I do. And I suppose it's trying to find that purpose in what you're going to do. Whether my purpose is clear, I know that I'm helping a lot of clients get back R&D funding they're entitled to. So it helps me out a lot as well.
Yeah. So the last 18 months has been quite interesting. You know, how have you found being a founder and launching your business during a global pandemic, and what sort of milestones have you hit? You know, speaking to a lot of companies, a lot of their growth has plateaued, or they've found it hard to connect with people and grow because it's not a normal environment. So how have you found launching in this global pandemic, and what sort of growth have you seen?
Yeah, it's a hard one, to be honest. It's double-ended sword, because ourselves personally done quite well, but I'm conscious as well that a lot of companies haven't. So I'm a bit wary to rub salt in the wound, so to speak. Or I know there's a lot of people struggling out there, especially more resource intensive or labor type companies. Again, it's easy for me to sit here and say either adapt and change or fail, but a lot of them companies either don't have the capital or their business models aren't around that. So yeah, I am sort of trying to tread carefully here, not to say I'm doing too well. But in regards to I think a lot of founders, and again, probably the business models, I might have been guilty of that. Daniel, you might have been in the past as well, is you set the own ways and not innovating as such to what you can do. So if you know a certain way of how you go about it, you're staying in the same lane. But if you essentially, because of COVID and a few other angles, are forced to make that change, otherwise you're going to lose your company and you're not adapting. I think that's an awesome key in regards to a lot of some companies being able to do that. I'm also conscious that cafes and other avenues, they can't do that. So I'm not speaking on behalf of them. But in regards to BourkeHood itself, it's helped me out a lot, to be fair, because we've got an office now in Australia, New Zealand, US and UK. It's allowed us to scale into them countries, I should say. We're earning 7 figures in our first financial year. We've over 200 clients, and we're looking to scale rapidly to help as many clients in this R&D space as possible, as well as people now relying on the R&D funding a lot more. So us being able to optimize their previous claims while also reassuring them that we are the best in what we do, we are going to keep you compliant. It helps a lot, because that may allow them to keep one more worker on, get them off whatever the Centrelink or the government incentives are for the R&D, or sorry, for the companies to survive. So yeah, it is a feel good story.
Yeah. Okay. Awesome. How have you seen the changes in the R&D incentive industry? You know, during your experience, you know, you've had the UK. The UK experience, the Australia experience, New Zealand and the US now. How is it different? How have you seen it change over the last, 6 years now? And what does that look like?
Yeah. Again, I'm probably not the right person, because there's a lot more smarter people than me that work for us that actually look at it from a compliance technical point of view. I can sort of look on the top level, but from the back end, again, that's why we hire the guys with the higher qualifications in specific sectors or the people with industry experience. In regards to the schemes themselves, it's getting tighter and tighter, but in saying that as well, if you have a specialist there to help you along the way, and I'm probably biased because obviously we're a specialist, they have the incentive there to give back money. That's their rule of thumb normally. They want to give back money, to create more jobs, to create innovation. Therefore, you have a better product, you pay taxes later on, people are paying tax, the economy is growing. That being said, there's also the people out there, or the cowboys as such, that are putting through anything, trying to claim whatever they can and go for it, which is going against what the scheme's there for, the incentive's there for. So you have this almost tug-of-war approach where the respective governing bodies are putting more people into them roles of legislation or regulators, so to speak, to crack down on them cowboys. But in saying that, if you had the expertise like we do at BourkeHood, you're going to get through the claims, because we have a 100% success rate. We're going to get that through for you. And that's what, because they do want to pay up, believe it or not, but it's just trying to eliminate a lot of them cowboys per se with the regulators and everybody else. So they have cracked down a little bit, especially in HMRC, the ATO, and Callahan's still fairly new, only about 2 years old. So yeah, they're going through it all now as well.
Yeah, awesome. No, that's great to hear. And one of our closing questions, I suppose I would also ask you, Jace, is what advice would you give founders looking to either start a business or the sort of advice that would prepare them for growth, similar as you have experienced?
Yeah, I was thinking about this morning, to be honest. And firstly, have a crack. We'll have a crack at something. Second of all, have a very good filter. And the reason why I say this for is there's going to be so many knockers. There's going to be people saying that you can't do this or don't do this or it's too hard. And 99% of the time, them people are the ones that have got this small vision. They're not going out of their comfort zone. They're not doing anything. The amount of times, not that I'm anywhere at all, don't get me wrong, but the amount of times I've been told you can't do it. Yeah, why don't you have a house? All these other areas is, yes, take on people's on board, but just remember you're a thoroughbred, not a mule. Not that people are mules, but you're thinking like a thoroughbred. You want to be thinking big. And all these other people that I get inspiration out of, think big. So take people's advice on board, let them just do it, but have that filter set that if you want to dream big, you want to do what you want to do, have a crack. There's 20 years ago was the best time to plant a tree. The next best time's now. So at the end of the day, have a crack, do it now. You'll learn from your own mistakes if it doesn't work the first time. I've had plenty of fails, especially that one I've mentioned. But after a while, you learn, and you'd rather not regret anything and have a crack now.
There's something that I would add to that, and from what I've seen, and you know, if you're an early stage founder or you're looking to start a business, build an entourage around you. Build people that you trust, people that may be slightly ahead of you, people that are at the same level as you, so you can leverage off ideas. You can be a sounding board, because what I have seen, you know, someone else, what I've seen and I've been through, someone else may be starting to experience it right now. So if I can help navigate through that, if I can help provide, you know, tips and experience to get them through, if you know, and I leverage off people that know more than me, and I'm sure Jason, you do the same. You know, if you want to expand into a new market, are you leveraging off people that have been there and done that before, have entered the new market? Have you got a team of you know, like-minded individuals around you, other founders, other people that you look up to and you share ideas with? What's that around you?
Yeah, so I'm a strong believer of a smart man learns from their own mistakes, a wise man learns from others. So there's no point trying to reinvent the wheel if someone else has done it. You can pretty much skip the whole process of doing stuff-ups, for lack of a better terminology. But in saying that too, I'm sick of the excuse that I need a mentor, I need to have co-founders.
Not a mentor, but like an entourage.
No. I agree. I agree with that. I have a good people, a good network around me. But in saying that, a lot of people that can't get access to that or don't have that entourage, there's a million books out there to go read. There's people that have already been there and done it. So it does help to have co-founders or an entourage. But in saying that, it's not the be all end all as well, because there's so many people that are their own people that can go do their own learning. And there's so many people out there that I hear is, oh, I don't have a mentor, I don't know anybody else doing it, or I don't have this entourage. They're all excuses, in my opinion. Yes, it helps. Yes, it's unreal to lean on, but excuses will always be there. You should have find them. So even if you don't have the entourage or don't have them co-founders, there's a million books out there. Go pick up something about digital marketing if you're going to be a digital marketer. Go pick up something about AI if you're going to do some AI. So I still think it's not the be all end all, but it does definitely help. I lean on yourself, Dan. Eva, lean on you. I lean on a lot of people. I'm probably very, very lazy in that aspect because I don't go try and do something if I know someone else has got the answer for me already.
Yeah.
And any specific book title that you've read that made a big impression on you that could recommend to read for founders?
I used to read a lot more than what I do now. I don't know if I can still read. Go for No by Richard Fenton if you're in sales. It essentially rewards the no's rather than the yeses. And a lot of the times in life, no's will correlate to more yeses, whether it be in opportunities, whether it be in growth. You always hear the cliche stories of people pitching Facebook, KFC, whatever it may be. They got 100 no's and then 11 people said yes, or whatever that may be. But unless you throw your hat in the ring, and it's a cliche basketball quote, you'll miss 100% of the shots you never take. So that's probably one. And again, yeah, I'm probably not the best bookworm to say it, but yeah, that'd be one that I live by for a sales perspective.
Yeah, and I like that because I think it boils down to this significant mindset shift because we're all scared of rejection ultimately, so it has to do with overcoming that fear.
Yeah, exactly. And rejection, I think, is always, it's not no, it's just not yet. And you're meant to get rejected. Life's about getting rejected. People don't realize it's not a bad thing. So even self-criticism as an example, I probably take that very, very badly myself personally, but it's not a bad thing. It's trying to improve you. It's meant to be happy. And unless you are getting rejected per se, or out of your comfort zone, you're never going to grow either. So I think it's very important from both angles.
Yeah, that's very insightful. Yeah, there's a couple of really good books that you read, and if you Google it, there's I always like following founders who have had successful exits and understanding where they went, how they did what they did, and what the outcomes were. For me, it's focusing on that, but always trying to.
If you don't mind interrupting, is I like them stories as well, but I tend to not read about them or stay away from them personally, only because it's like training in the gym. When you're 16, 17 years old and you're in the gym or whatever it may be, there's so much contradiction on supersetting, doing this, doing that. And I think nowadays everyone focuses on these unicorns or these exits of companies who have done a Series A, Series B, Series C, Series D, whatever it may be. And there's no right or wrong approach. And especially when people are diluting the CEO, they haven't eaten normal food for 2 years. They're eating beans, 2-minute noodles, whatever it is to stay alive. They raise, then dilute themselves down to 4% or whatever that may be. Yes, they'll probably hit that $1 billion valuation, but now they're pretty much an employee after this when they have exited. And then you've got on the flip side the successful ones, which might take them longer to go at the very start, but they ended up listing on a stock exchange, or they end up being still private, and they've still got 80, 90%. So they're higher net worth, but they haven't had that exponential growth. So often what I find is I read these books and there's no one shoe fits all, whereas everyone thinks they've got to replicate these models. And believe it or not, it's probably only 1% or 0.5% that do hit that unicorn. I don't know what it is, probably lower than that, but do hit that unicorn status. And everyone's trying to do the same thing, but they're trying to replicate something that's so totally different, and it could have been done so many different ways.
Yeah, there's no right or wrong path, but it's just getting the inspiration from what these people did. There's if you want to read a good book, I liked Shoe Dog, the autobiography for Phil Knight, the founder of Nike, and he was just a pure hustler. He finished college. He was getting a 9-to-5 job, and he said, I'm gonna take some time and just travel. And he found himself in Japan, and he saw him being a runner in college, and he liked running. He was looking for a solution that fit him, and he found a shoe that he liked, and he basically bluffed his way to say that he had this massive company in the US and he wanted to be their distributor on the west coast of the US. Little did they know that he hadn't even registered his businesses yet. Like he was nothing, but he bluffed his way into it and got this contract and started selling these shoes. And on the back of that, he was able to test the market, grow this business, make all this revenue, and he was living putting it all in. At times he was doing millions of dollars in sales, but had no money in the bank, because as soon as he would sell all the sales, he would just double up his next order. And then that led him to innovate and, and to change. And he's changed the entire apparel market. And Nike is the arguably the biggest brand on the planet because of his driver. But that mentality, that hustle, that's the sort of thing that you take from it. Not if he's raised a bunch of capital and done a Series A, Series B. It's that mentality aspect that, just do it. And, he was faked it till you make it, right? And he really made it. So that's a really good book to watch as well. But we'll leave it at that. Jason, thanks for jumping on and talking to us about the R&D industry and BourkeHood. It gives us a really good insight into what you're doing and the global, sort of aspects and aspiration you have. If anybody who's watching this video has any questions about R&D, please get in contact with us and we can pass you on to Jason. He'd be happy to have a chat.
Perfect. Thanks so much for your time, Dan. Sorry, I've just got the Olympics in the background as well while I'm speaking. I appreciate your time, guys. Thanks for that. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thanks, Jake.
Bye.